The aim of the discourse is to examine the foundations of inequality among men and to determine whether this inequality is authorized by natural law. Rousseau attempts to demonstrate that modern moral inequality, which is created by an agreement between men, is unnatural and unrelated to the true nature of man. To examine natural law, Rousseau argues it is necessary to consider human nature and to chart how that nature has evolved over the centuries to produce moral civil man and modern society. To do this, he begins in the imaginary state of nature, a condition before society and the development of reason. Rousseau attempts to conjecture or guess what man in this state would be like. Rousseau described this man in nature. It is strong and agile, but more organized than the animals in his environment. His body is his only tool and his only weapon, and Rousseau states that civil man would be easily beaten by savage man in a fight. This natural man or savage man neither knows good nor evil. His thought is composed of simple operations. He has few needs, and for that he easily manages to satisfy them. His passions are those of nature. Food, sex, and rest are the only things good for him, and his only evils are pain and hunger. He examines man's physical and mental characteristics and finds him to be an animal like any other, motivated by two key principles: pity and self preservation. The only real attribute that separates him from the animals is his perfectibility, an ability to be molded by one's environment. This distinct and unlimited faculty is the source of all of man's miseries. It draws him out of his original condition and causes his enlightenment, his vices, and his virtues to develop. Man's first language was the cry of nature, stemming from mere instinct. It had no real use in ordinary communication. As human ideas increased, gestures became more important and language expanded. It is clear that nature has done little to bring men together or to make them sociable. There is no reason why men in the natural state should need each other. Those who talk of the misery of the state of nature are wrong, Rousseau says, as for example, few savages would want to commit suicide, suggesting that their life is more pleasant than ours. In his instinct alone, savage man has all the needs. We should not conclude, as Hobbes does, that because savage man has no idea of good, that he is wicked. Hobbes understood the problem with modern natural right theories, but his answer was equally flawed. He should have said that in the state of nature, care for our own self-preservation did not conflict with the self-preservation of others. This time was therefore the best for mankind. But Hobbes, in fact, said that it was the worst. He did this because he took the need to satisfy passions that are part of society as part of savage man's self-preservation. Hobbes did not see that the same cause that keeps savages from using their reason also keeps them from abusing their faculties. Savages are not wicked because they do not know what it is to be good, and the calm of their passions and their ignorance of vice keeps them from doing harm. Rousseau says that he has dwelt on man's beginnings because he feels he needs to dig at the root and show that in the genuine state of nature, inequality has less influence than writers claim. It is easy to see that many differences between people are taken to be natural, although really they result only from habit and the different lifestyles men adopt in society. Natural inequality increases as a result of instituted inequality. It would be hard to make savage man understand what domination is or to make him obey you. Ties and servitude are formed solely by men's mutual dependence and the reciprocal needs that unite them, and it is impossible to subjugate a man without placing him in a position where he needs another person. The condition of a nascent man was simple. His first care was for self-preservation. He had few needs apart from food, rest, and sex. Man scarcely dreamt of exploiting or profiting from nature. However, difficulties soon arose. Man had to become agile, run, fight, and overcome the obstacles of nature. Difficulties multiplied as man spread. Different climates produced different lifestyles. As man learned to hunt animals, he began to consider himself preeminent among species. This was the beginning of pride in himself as an individual. Savage man was solitary, but gradually began to see similarities between himself and other people. Man was in a position to judge when he should cooperate with others, and such dealings did not require a refined language. Initial progress became more rapid. Men discovered tools and how to build huts. This was the first revolution which led to the establishment of families and a sort of property. Conjugal love resulted from families living together. Each family was like a small society. Women became sedentary and stayed at home while men foraged. The sedentary individuals became less able to resist wild beasts but better at cooperating to fight them. Men enjoyed a great deal of pleasure in this new state. They acquired new conveniences that weakened their bodies and minds and which turned into needs. They were unhappy to possess these needs but equally unhappy to lose them. Various natural catastrophes made language increasingly necessary. Floods, earthquakes, and revolutions of the globe broke up land masses and brought men together, forcing them to communicate. Mankind became more settled. Nations eventually formed, conjugal love increased, as did ideas of merit and preference. Jealousy eventually developed together with love, and discord triumphs. Songs and dances in villages led to comparison amongst people, as the best dancers or singers were applauded for, while others were not. This was the beginning of inequality and vice. As soon as men began to appreciate each other, civility and consideration became important. Contempt for another became a serious offense, and this is the state of contemporary savage people, which makes people think that man is naturally cruel and needs political order to survive. But in reality, nothing is as gentle as natural man, Rousseau says. Now, Rousseau talks about the formation of civil society and says that the first man who enclosed a piece of ground and then said, "It is mine," and then found people gullible enough to believe him, was the true founder of civil society. People would have stopped many crimes and miseries if they had prevented this man from taking that land. But in all likelihood, things back then had reached the point of no return. Much progress had been made before this last stage of the stage of nature. As long as man applied himself only to one man task, they were free and healthy. The moment when one man needed the help of another and one man wanted what was enough for two, equality disappeared, work became necessary, and oppression developed. This second revolution was caused by agriculture. The division of land followed its cultivation. From property came the first rules of justice. It is impossible to conceive of early property other than in terms of man's labor. Labor gives a right to land, which is transformed into property. Things could have remained equal in this state if talents and the use of resources had been equal. Natural inequality imperceptibly unfolds together with unequal associations, and the differences between men became more obvious and started to influence events. Human faculties were now fully developed. Self respect and reason were active, and the mind was almost at the limit of its perfection. To be and to appear became two different things, and from this arose cunning and all the vices. Man was now subjugated by a multitude of new needs, but especially by his need for other men. In fact, man became a slave to men when he tried to be their master. Domination became the only pleasure of the rich. When the powerful claimed a kind of right to another person's goods equivalent to the right of property, the breakdown of equality led to a state of war. In response, the rich developed the best trick ever invented, which was to persuade the weak to unite with them into a supreme power to institute rules of justice and peace. Little was needed to convince such crude and easily seduced men. All ran towards their chains in the belief that they were securing their freedom. Those who did realize the nature of the trick thought that they could trade part of their freedom for security. This was the origin of society. It irreversibly destroyed natural freedom, fixed the laws of inequality and property, and turned usurpation into right. Different forms of government derive from the original differences between individuals. If one man was preeminent, then a monarchy was formed. If several predominated, then an aristocracy was formed. The states that stayed close together to the state of nature formed democracies. Time concluded which was the best form. All magistracies were at first elective. Then the selection process led to strife and civil war, so hereditary government was instituted. This is how leaders came to see the people as their property. If you follow the progress of inequality, you find that establishment of law and property was the first stage, the institution of monarchy the second, and the conversion of legitimate to arbitrary power the last. The first stage authorizes the state of rich and poor, the second, the state of powerful and weak, and the last, the relationship of master and slave. The same vices that make institutions necessary make their abuse inevitable. Laws contain men without changing them, and a country where no men broke the law would need not laws. After the argument of the previous two sections, Rousseau's conclusions are not that surprising. That inequality has its origins in the rise of reason and enlightenment, that it is legitimated by laws and property, and that it is against natural law unless it is related to physical inequality. All the threads of Rousseau's argument, critiques of man, human development, and modern society, are drawn together at this point.